Good afternoon, everyone, and happy Pride, happy Friday. Welcome to Allyship for the Queer Community, which is presented by One Pulse Foundation. It's a First Friday program powered by Curaleaf and Select. My name is Scott Bowman. I'm the Chief Communications Officer for One Pulse Foundation, and I'm proud to be joining Barbara Poma, who's the founder of One Pulse Foundation, and this is the nonprofit that was established to honor and preserve the legacy of the 49 killed and all those affected by the Pulse nightclub tragedy of June 12, 2016. The mission of our foundation is to create and support a memorial that opens hearts, a museum that opens minds, educational programs that open eyes, and legacy scholarships that open doors. We're very excited to be here with you today to have a conversation about allyship, and I'm very honored to hand the baton over to Barbara Poma to start our presentation.
Thank you so much, Scott, and thank you again to the Curaleaf team for welcoming us into your organization. We love this partnership and we love these opportunities to work together. I'm going to go ahead and start the presentation with a short video. So if you will just sit back, relax, watch that, we'll begin our conversation following it.
Just started off as a regular night, and it was one of those nights that I enjoyed because there was so much dancing.
We had a lot of friends in town, so they wanted to go somewhere where they could have fun, and Pulse is the place.
My beautiful daughter, Amanda, she was 25 years old. She always talked about Pulse being a fun place. Everybody was always having a great time. She says, "Mommy, it's so chic, you will love it."
The night is going really well. People are happy, dancing, singing.
I remember the bartender pouring our drinks. Everything went from great in a normal night to complete chaos.
We interrupt our program this morning because we have some breaking news to bring you out of downtown Orlando.
Before you know it, there's people being shot right next to you.
I remember making my way towards the door, and one of my staff members pulled me in the opposite direction and said, "Don't go back inside."
Look at that, just shooting back and forth. That is crazy. Look at this.
She always invited me to go to Pulse with her friends, and I just didn't get to go with her. I was tired, and that you always think of things that you could have or you would have, and it's hard. It's hard.
Orlando came together to emerge from the darkness.
I think it was mesmerized, really, by the amount of outpouring of love and the messages and how Orlando, the community, came together.
All the love and the support from the community, from the world, that makes me happy. That just gives me so much hope. That is the best thing that could have ever happened from this tragedy.
It was overwhelming, and it was overwhelming in a good way. Something that came from such hatred turned out to be something so beautiful from all of the world.
The trauma of that night resonated everywhere in the world. Empathy, yes, but trauma. And trauma splits. Splits a country, splits communities, splits us into factions. Orlando chose to come together over splitting apart. Chose to embrace the ways we are the same over hating the ways we are different. Now we can choose to embrace that mission. If we are to be a society that comes together rather than splitting apart, what happened at Pulse on June 12th and since are essential sources of learning and inspiration. And the National Pulse Memorial and Museum is an essential American institution. The hope, the resolve, and the choice is ours.
So taking it back, excuse me, I know my voice was going to do that. Bear with me for a minute. Taking it back a little further in history to lighten the mood a little bit, you can see my family here. This is our true family photos. That is my brothers and sisters, my parents. And I share these not only to lighten the mood, but so that you can understand that the time period that I was growing up in the 80s when my brother John, who's standing behind me, came out in our very stereotypical, very Italian Catholic family. And so not one of the proudest moments in my family's history, but it is something we did endure and it's something we did triumph and come out through the other end. But during John's coming out time, it became that fix-it time. It became that, when do you send John to a priest or you send him to a therapist and you try to control where he goes. And so my family's going through this time of trying to figure it out. And during that time, they would kind of make me his tag along. John was 4 years older than me, so you can see he's the closest to me in age in the photograph. You can see that. And I can tell you that John was everything that I was not. I am very A-type personality. I'm very much check your box kind of girl, follow every single rule. And John was the polar opposite. He was extraordinarily funny and witty. He was the best person you could ever play the board game Mad Libs, if you're old enough to know what that is, because he just came out with the best adjectives and verbs you could possibly come out to make the best stories ever. So he was just everything I wasn't, and I loved being around him. So my mom would make him take me as a tag along everywhere he went during that period because she just kind of felt like there was no way John was going to do anything gay in front of his 14 and 15-year-old sister. Like that was just not going to happen. They should have known John better than that because he absolutely was going to do exactly what John wanted to do, and it was going to be fine. So I grew up in the community. I grew up on gay beaches of South Florida. I grew up dancing with gay men and drag queens. To me, it was the best childhood ever. I loved being with him, and I loved his adventures, and it was a great time of my life. So I guess you could say I was just raised to be an ally on the front lines, and so I didn't know anything different. And this community was very much my norm. We lost John in the early 90s in the AIDS epidemic, and I was with him when he took his very last breath. We buried him. We buried every single one of his friends. It was something that, unless you lived through, it's just something you can see in movies. But everything you hear about that time was true. I was with him when they wouldn't bathe him, when they wouldn't bring his food into his room. And so living through that at a very young age, there was a lot of impressions on my heart and in my mind. And so after we lost him and I lost my connection to the community that I absolutely loved and adored, I did volunteer work in the community. But we fast forward a few years and I married a really wonderful guy who opens a restaurant in a gay neighborhood unknowns to him, which was really fun. That's another whole side story. And so we open this restaurant, and there we meet, as cliche as it sounds, our next gay best friend. And so my husband had never had a gay best friend before, so this was all new to him. But it was his idea to open this club, and so he brought this idea to my husband, and my husband's like, absolutely no way. I've come far enough. I'm an ally to this community, but I don't think I can own a gay bar. And so our partner brought us this great business plan. My husband says to me, well, Barbara, if you want to do this, if you promise to run it, and you promise to own it and take care of it, and I never have to step foot in it, you can have it. And so that's how Pulse was born. And so that's how, I grew up as a straight ally. I was an ally when I opened this club. My husband became an ally. My children grew up inside of Pulse. Some were old enough to go there, went there, but some of those, my babies who were not, came with me for meetings. And so my children were raised in staff meetings at the nightclub from toddlership all the way to school age. So this was, allyship is something that's real strong in our family. And I guess some people have to make an intentional effort to do it. For us, it's just part of who we are. So a couple of things about Pulse, so it makes it different. And people say, why was Pulse any different than any other bar? And I can tell you that when we concepted Pulse from the very, 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 very beginning, we wanted to make sure that it'd be a beautiful, clean space that you would be proud to bring your mother and to bring your family. We know that we achieved that goal. Sadly, we don't, because on the night of the shooting, we did lose 2 moms. We did lose 3 fathers. One was dancing with her gay son. We lost a straight mom who had her first girls' night out after having her second baby. We had a mother and a son escape together. So we knew that we became a place for families. There were plenty of times my mother was at Pulse. My children have been there. I can tell you that it's interesting to look back to see when we did our turnabout events every year, which is when the staff who didn't do drag would come and do drag. It was horrible drag, but they would come and they would do it to raise money for the Hope and Help Center here in Orlando. And the family members of the staff would come to watch them. And I remember the moms going, this is just for tonight, right? They don't do drag all year long. And I'd say, no, they don't. But to know that their brothers and sisters and mothers and fathers, aunts and uncles would all come and then came all year long. So we know they created a beautiful, clean space that everyone felt welcome. But the second most intentional thing we did at Pulse was that we were really torn with this because it doesn't normally happen. And if you live in a city that has lots of gay community, you'll know this. There's usually a bar or a night for the girls, and then there's a bar or a night for the bears, right? Or the twain, for the young people, the old people. So there's always like this, the community itself has found a way to keep itself segregated from each other. And so when we opened Pulse, we said, no, this is gonna be a place that every single letter, LGBTQ+, would be welcome in every single night of the week. And so how we did that was that we made sure we hired staff that was reflective of who we wanted to bring in. So you would see girls and boys dancing on the bar, and you'd see boys of every shape, size, and color. You see trans people working, not just in the shows, but as management. You saw girls serving drinks, right? And so everywhere you went, you saw someone who looked like you or someone who you'd like to look at, we hope. And so not every guy there was a muscle jock. Not every guy had their shirt off. And so that is something that was really, really intentional. And we made those decisions on purpose. And that's how Pulse became the place that it became. And it didn't matter who you were, that you were always welcome. So how we became successful is that we made sure that every night may not have been for a certain person, but it was for a certain demographic of music. So on Wednesdays was our college night, and Wednesday we played a lot of house music on the main dance floor. The room you're looking at right here is the main dance floor. So on Wednesdays, you would have found house music. On Fridays, you would have found hip hop music. And on Saturdays, the night of the shooting, you would find Latin music. What that meant is in the other rooms, you'd find the flip-flop. So, you would find that in the dancer room on Wednesdays when house was being played, you'd find hip hop in the dance room and you'd find Latin music on the patio. So those music formats just changed, but it gave everybody a place to belong. When we talk about the story of Pulse, we know it is the story of all of us. We know it is because this community lives in every community. You didn't have to go to Pulse in Orlando on the corner of Orange and Cayley. You have one in your neighborhood. You know it was the first place you came out. It was the first place you felt comfortable in. And that is most important, that we talk about how it happens, not just here, but what happens all around the world in every space. And so with that, we're going to talk about how you can become an ally all year long, what that looks like from someone who is an ally and from someone like Scott, who lives in the LGBTQ community, what that means from their point of view. So Scott, if you want to, I'll just click through. Do you want to start kicking off this conversation and talk about allyship?
Sure. We thought it would be helpful just to put a basic definition on here for us all to kind of level set in the conversation. So we define it as an action that is not exclusive to the LGBTQ+ community, and it's learning new ways to personally step up to make your organization a more inclusive and accepting space. And in order to get there, that requires education, work, and practice from everyone involved. And then we felt, you know, just to define it, so again, so we're all kind of on the same page in the conversation, how we would describe what an ally is. And it's one that's associated with another as a helper, a person or group that provides assistance and support in an ongoing effort, activity, or struggle. And we believe that the key word here is ongoing. It's a journey, it's an education, and everyone travels the path differently in this journey, depending on where they start.
And to add to that, I would kind of say this ongoing effort means, to me, it applies that, you know, just because June is Pride Month doesn't mean this is the only month you're an ally to the gay community, right? And October shouldn't be the only month you think about women with breast cancer. These problems and marginalized communities, they need your support all year long. The Black community, the brown community needs your support all year long. This is something we talk about here because just so happened because tragedy happened on June 12th, 96% of the people in our building, of our victims, the Black and brown community. And some were straight and some were gay. So we have to talk about that word ongoing and realizing how you need to continue it in your life every single day of the week, no matter what the month is.
And I would add to that, Barbara, because that's a very good point. You know, we here in Orlando partner with a lot of other LGBTQ plus organizations and organizations that serve people of color as well. And one of the things, you know, our internal joke is, especially for the LGBTQ organizations, is we are gay all year long. And so we appreciate that everyone comes to us on Pride Month and want to support us. But I think the real effort and that ongoing effort is how can we look at ways past June or in addition to June to make that partnership year long or stronger.
Exactly. So I think I'll take this one because I grew up as an ally to this community. I really relate to these 7 points. And taking on the struggle as your own is something that I was privileged enough to do firsthand. You know, I had a front row seat to what that struggle looked like. I grew up watching that struggle, and you know, it was different for me. But if you are not as lucky as I was to grow up with a gay brother or anybody gay in your house or in your family, you know, make it your point to get educated about what's happening around you in your workplace. Is there anybody who's LGBTQ plus in your workplace? Get to know them, learn about them, and learn about the struggles and educate yourself on that. Transfer the benefits of your own privilege to those who lack it. And what that means is that I have to own the fact that I am a straight woman. So when I see someone who is of the community, who is being marginalized in any way, shape, or form, being yelled at, you know, have things thrown at them, right, and have words slurs or bad jokes or whatever it is, you know, it's up to me to say I have to use my privilege right here, and you know, and say stand up for that person at that moment, in that moment, with them and in front of them and for them. To amplify your voice of the oppressed before your own, which means exactly what it says. Speak for them, amplify their voice, and to make sure that you do that loud and proud. Excuse me, Scott, you might have to take over.
I got number 4. It's also, you know, to acknowledge that even though you feel pain, the conversation is not about you. And I think that's a really important point, to have the courage to start a conversation with someone in one of the communities that you may be talking about that you want to be an ally to. And I think that leads into the next step 2, which is stand up even when you feel scared. I think a lot of us sometimes when it's something like this and you may be unsure or it's something new to you, but you know you feel passionate about it and you want to learn and you want to do something, most likely in that situation, there's a lot of people around you that will lift you up and support you who may be even going through the same thing. And you know, there's that saying that there's power in numbers, right? But at the same point, it always takes one person to stand up and start an important dialogue conversation. I think the important thing to remember here is you're never alone. And there are a lot of people who would most likely join you in the conversation. And if everyone approaches it, we always talk about intent, right? If everyone approaches it from the intent of this is a learning experience, we can learn together. We know we want to do something here. We may not know all the steps to make it happen, but having the dialogue and the conversation will get us on the right path.
Number 6 is a hard one, and I know that for sure. It is very hard in any situation to own your own mistakes. takes a big person to do that to begin with. But when you're in this situation and you are standing up for a marginalized community, you have to be able to say, I'm really sorry I did that. Did I use the wrong pronoun, right? And realize it's not about you. It keeps coming back to the feelings. It's not about you, and you can't impose your own feelings or your own guilt onto someone else. And just being able to say that goes a long way with someone. It's very common to misgender someone because you don't know. But it's okay to say, I'm really sorry I did that. Or please tell me if I've offended you, because you want to learn to get better, right?
Can I say on the flip side of
Sure.
that too, Barbara, for the LGBTQ community, if that's conversation about the pronouns, that goes both ways to me, because in order to people to feel educated and that it's a safe space to have the dialogue, then the person on this side of the conversation too has to have some grace in their heart. So if someone does make a mistake, use it as a teaching opportunity versus, getting angry or mad about it as well. And we have that conversation a lot in our community about people are trying. If the intent is good and they're really trying to do their best, we have to have some grace in our hearts about that too.
Yeah, because that is scary, to do. I know that when I sometimes I use the wrong pronoun or I say the name wrong or however I sometimes get it wrong. I'm always afraid of what the lashing I might get. I have a child who went to a private school who had a gender fluid student friend, and so that child would get very upset if they presented one day as a female and someone used the wrong pronoun. And then the next day they felt presenting as a boy, and then someone used the female name. I mean, and then they would get lashings for it. The teachers would take it out on the teachers, and the teachers would be like, well, how am I supposed to know every day you're going back and forth, and that's hard. So it's I really appreciate you saying that, Scott, because it's really up to the community to give us grace and be like, thank you for trying, but
Yes.
and to move that forward. And the last, go ahead.
I was going to say, because if we don't, then it almost shuts people down, because it's scary for people and they don't want to get it wrong. And they want, it could be an embarrassing moment for someone, like you said. And that's why I think we have to have grace about it, right? It's just that the intent is good and someone's making the effort and they want to do right, even if they make a mistake.
Exactly. And number 7 really talks a little bit about what I said in number 1. Understand that education is up to you and no one else. Do your homework. Try your best. You're not going to be perfect at it, but learn about it. I mean, learn about the struggles of this community, for the LGBTQ community. It's more than just Stonewall, right? There are other events that have happened. There's things that have happened in your own community where you live that you should know about. And learn about the laws of your community. Sometimes people don't understand if conversion therapy is still legal in the state you live in, right? Or how is their equality index going in the city you live in. So learn about this and learn what's happening in your area so that it gives you a better place to come from. I think we talked a little about this, but it's true. I love the fact that this is so big on the screen. Don't be so afraid of making them that you don't do your best every day. It is really easy to be discouraged. I know that firsthand. I feel it. I'm older, even though I was raised in the community and I'm an ally at heart and an ally by nature. I make mistakes, and the community has been changing. We have so many new names and genders and sexualities to learn, and sometimes we get it wrong. So again, Scott, I think this reiterates that we need grace from both sides. Good. I can't hear you.
Sorry, you're muted.
I don't know how that happened. I think, to that on this slide too is very important. It's pretty simple. If a mistake has happened, you just apologize for it. And it goes back to that intent and as part of the conversation, and again, it goes on both sides. And I think everyone needs to approach it with a healthy mindset that, the end result of this is something good. It's something positive for both sides of the conversation. So there's the same goal at the end of this conversation that everyone wants. So let's just figure out how to get there.
I think we try to break this out into some do's and don'ts. And so just to go through them as, be open to listening and not just listening to other people when they're talking, but listen in your community as an overall too. Be aware of your implicit biases and microaggressions. It happens all the time. I have seen my own husband sometimes walk up to someone in the store and be like, hey, honey, can you help me? I'm like, oh, for the love of God, why are you still saying honey like that, or baby, right? And so be careful of, educate yourself on what those microaggressions look like, be aware of it and correct yourself and apologize for them when they happen. I talked about this earlier, research the history of struggles, learn to accept criticism with grace, and it is going to be uncomfortable. We all know that. In case you don't know what a microaggression is, these are, everyday verbal and nonverbal environmental slights, snubs or insults, whether intentional or unintentional, that communicate hostile, derogatory, or negative messages to persons. So it's as easy as that. It's as easy as a honey. It's as easy as a baby. Scott, what do you hear in the community from the gay community that really hurts?
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you just for me, I was with my partner for 10 years, and people struggled to even say the word partner, right? When we would introduce ourselves, or someone was introducing us, they would say, this is Scott and they would struggle with the word to even say partner, and you have to fill in the blanks. Questions about, I know it sounds like we would say no one really would say something like this, right? But, someone would look at you as a male couple. Which one of you is the male? Which one of you is the female? Like anything like that, right? Sometimes people, again, may not know better. It depends on how they were raised. It depends on them as a person, their life experiences. And some of them could be asking from a place of, I really am trying to learn here. And you just have to be able to decipher kind of, again, the intent of the conversation. There's, I think, lots of times at family gatherings, lots of times at the holidays, for same-sex couples, a lot of these things can come up and have to be kind of talked through.
Here's a couple of examples of those we haven't talked about yet. How long have you been with your husband? When you see, it just should be your spouse or your partner, because you don't know if she has a wife or if she has a husband, right? I've seen, and I've actually heard people say this, you don't look gay. It's like, oh, it's how stereotypical is that? It's like, oh, nice, like as if someone who, it's a certain way that a gay person should look. So I know I've heard them.
I've got a good one on that one. I actually had someone tell me once that you're more of a corporate gay. And I said, can you explain this to me? This is the first time I've ever heard of it. So again, you just never know some of the questions. I've heard, you don't dress gay, you don't look gay, you don't speak gay, or the opposite of that, where you do, So these conversations, they kind of run the gamut, the whole spectrum of topics.
We thought this was a really good quote, and maybe you want to take note of it, is that so many microaggressions can be unconscious and come from a well-meaningful place, but are still harmful. And I think this really ties up in one sentence what we've been talking about, meaning that your intent is good, but it comes across hurtful, and that opens up that chance for communication. And you have to be able to own it. Someone needs to give you grace, and you have to apologize, and then you have to learn from it. Right? It's like, how many times can you say, I'm sorry, right? At some point in time, you have to make it become part of your conversation and part of your language, and to adopt it in that way. So here we're talking about some ways we can address this at work. First, understanding what microaggressions are and don't use them. So the things that you can do at work to help that is give people your full attention. To the best of your ability. I mean, there are some people who are on the spectrum, so that's hard for them to do because they easily can't do that. But if you're on a Zoom call, keep your camera on. If you're sitting in a meeting, keep your phone down. Look people in the eye. Pay attention. Don't interrupt someone when they're talking by cutting someone off. You don't know. And I did not realize this because I thought conversations kind of went. It was okay if we just kind of kept interrupting people. But when I had a conversation with someone who was African American, they found that extremely insulting. I didn't realize, I didn't see that from their lens, how that made them feel. So I think that that's a really important lesson to learn. I know that I have to learn to sit back and contain my excitement in my conversation because I don't know how someone else is going to hear that. Echo and attribute the ideas to the owner. How many times you've been sitting in a room and someone will say, hey, I got a great idea, and then there's no real response for that. And then 5 minutes later, someone else will say, like, oh my God, that's an amazing idea. And you say, oh, I got that from so-and-so. Point it back to the person that it came from. That happens a lot to marginalized people in communities. And again, you don't know how they're taking that. And so you have to be really keen and aware of how the communities are feeling. Learn the language. Number one, we hear about it all the time. Pronouns, pronouns, pronouns. It's hard for us old people because we didn't grow up with them. And so now everyone's using them to identify, and out of respect, it means a lot to this generation. So be respectful of that and use them as well as you can and properly. Listen and learn. I think we'll say listen and learn on every single slide today. So when we're done, if you learn nothing and you remember nothing, those two key things, listen and learn. I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that, Scott, or any kind of instances.
No, I think for work too, it's always, I think this is true of any work setting too, is just when you're talking about anything at work, policies, procedures, special events, products, it's always good to have different lenses and different viewpoints around the table, right? So make sure that you're looking at the diversity of your workforce too, and that you're giving people in all the different demographics and lifestyles an opportunity to share their lens and their view on all of this from the beginning of the process or the beginning of the procedure or the beginning of the event or the product, so you can have really thoughtful and purposeful conversations through the journey of those conversations too. It's always good to have as many different lenses on a topic as possible.
So these are some ways that we can help on a daily basis in your workplace. Advocate for others in small ways, intervene. If you see someone being belittled or insulted, if you see someone who is misgendered, intervene in that moment. You stand up for them and with them. And so it's not that just enough to give sympathy, it's, to see how they are, but it's really, they'll feel more empowered to know that they have an ally in the room with them at all times. Refer to someone from a marginalized community for a job or a professional opportunity. I know we are super intentional about that because that's what our organization does and that's who we are. But if you are working in a workspace that is not, and you know someone who is LGBTQ+ or is of a marginalized community, encourage them to send their resumes and encourage those meetings. Invite members of marginalized communities to participate in panels, especially if they're not represented in your workplace. Get them on panels and actually encourage people to watch panels of those communities to learn and educate themselves more. You want to take this one, Scott, to slide?
I sure will. Also, always everyone is looking for a mentor. I know I can name some of the best mentors I've had in my career over the years. And it's always good to have someone to talk to show someone, new employees especially, or people that are just joining your company or coming from another community, to just be able to work with them, mentor them, help to learn the company, help them to learn the community, sponsoring another coworker. Again, it's just an effort to let people know that they're not alone, that they are made to feel welcome. And you can also carry this over into volunteer opportunities. You're right. Most companies like yours have really robust volunteer programs, and it allows you to get out into your different communities to learn more about the community, how your business goals and the community needs kind of merge. And one of the ways you can do that is serving and really looking at the different marginalized communities in your footprint where you are, and seeing how you can get more involved. And also, when you do listening sessions from a company standpoint, or you're looking for feedback on anything that you're doing, don't ever, just don't forget these marginalized communities too, because they, again, will have a lens that's different than others that you may be working with. So again, it gives you an opportunity to have a more well-rounded conversation. And then this kind of goes back to the point I made a few slides ago, is to always encourage your team and your company, a bigger stance here, to bring diversity to the table every day. It goes back to that conversation of a better culture, a better product, a better service, because you're getting more people involved in the dialogue from the beginning. You're bringing more people around the table to have the conversation. And that typically it doesn't mean you have to agree on everything that's being talked about. Obviously, it's a healthy debate sometimes, which is great. But again, at the end of the conversation, you're having a better conversation because of it. So it goes back to, let's just really put an effort into making sure that you have all the right people at the table when you're having discussions like this.
Oh, where did that came from? All right, we're going to stop the share. Hang on a second. So I think one thing we want to add to what we talked about today before we open up for discussion is that what allyship, what all of this conversation really boils down to is belonging. Every human being wants to belong somewhere. It is important that they find their space, that they feel that they belong. And so when you have someone in your space, in your workspace, who it doesn't feel that way, right? The best way to become an ally is to help that, is to help them belong. And so I encourage you to reach out to those people that you find that aren't connected yet, who aren't at the table, and bring them in. It's the only way to really encourage a better society and a better humanity overall. And it really is the key to creating good relationships in everything we do.
And I would say that, you know, that's a moment of self-reflection for all of us too, because I'm pretty sure that all of us have been in a situation from, you know, from our youth to our adulthood where there were times where we did feel that we didn't belong to something. It could be even in school, right? Like when if you were picked last for a sporting event, or you're in physical education, or at a work situation, you got passed for a promotion, or you didn't get asked to be on a committee. You can really think about those times for yourself as an individual and how it made you feel. And remember that feeling when you see someone else going through that, and just help them through it. Again, it's all about intent. We've all been through it. That's just part of life. It's part of our life journey. And I think it's always good to kind of self-reflect on things that we've been through so we can help others through it when we see them going through it too.
Thank you, Scott. I don't know if there are any questions in the Q&A. If there's not, I think we'll just tie it up for today and thank everyone. So, Scott, you want to tie it up? Do you want me to do so?
Yeah, no, I'm just checking the chat real quick too.
Okay.
Just make sure. I think we're good. We just really want to thank you all for your partnership. We want to thank you for allowing us to have this dialogue today. We hope that there was something in the discussion that really resonates with you, that you can carry on and think about it a little bit more, and maybe possibly have even further discussions within your community at work or with your friends as well. As we said, it's always great to have learning opportunities. Intent is huge. And we really hope that this is something that you can carry along with you both personally and professionally. And we thank you for the time.
Thank you. Happy Friday, everyone.
Yes.
Thank you guys. I'm going to stop recording now.